Let me welcome everybody. Let me welcome you to the Future Trends Forum. My name is Bryan Ollendyke. I'm your host, the creator of the forum, as well as its chief cat herder. I'm very glad to see you all here today, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. But before we begin, let me introduce the forum and tell you a bit about how it works and where it came from, who supports it, and then we'll dive in. So first of all, you should know a discussion-based area. This is where we converse about the future of education and technology. And this discussion spun out of our monthly trends analysis called the Future Trends in Technology and Education Report. If you haven't seen FTTE, just go to ftte.us, download a few sample reports if you like, sign up if you'd like to have more. The August report just came out a couple of days ago with a lot of great stuff in it. So you can also follow the hashtag FTTE to learn more about that. Over to the next slide, please, Tara. Now, both the forum and the FTTE report are part of a larger project called the Future of Education Observatory. Now, this is a continuous, ongoing, social, and open attempt to try and grapple with the future of education technology. This includes the forum and the report, but it also includes a blog, it includes a book club and a bookstore, and more beside. So if you haven't seen that yet, it's a unique project, a unique effort. Go to futureofeducation.us to learn more. Over to the next slide, please. Now, we can only do this work with the support of some very generous sponsors, and I'd like to thank them before we proceed. To begin with, NYSERNet in New York State, a nonprofit that helps that state's colleges and universities get on broadband networks. They do fantastic work, and we had a great meeting with them in July in Cooperstown, New York. We're really grateful to work with them, and we're very, very thankful for their support. Thankfully available the technology we're using right now. So let me just walk you through it and show you how we use this to converse. Where I am right now, and where this slide is just for another minute, it's called the stage. Everybody here can see and hear everything that comes from the stage. So you can see me, you can hear my voice, you can see this cool old card catalog behind me, and you can join us on stage. I'll show you how. Below us is what I think of as the participant swarm, where the audience is. There's 44, 45 people. You can look around, you can see the smiling faces of folks like Kate Borowski and Tom Hames, and you'll see their icons move back and forth. And this is everyone who participates in the community. Now, if you'd like to talk with one of those people on a one-to-one basis, simply double-click on their icon. And if they feel like talking to you and their mic and their camera are working, your two icons will click together like Lego bricks, and you'll have your own private audiovisual bubble, which is pretty neat. Now, there are other ways to communicate with the whole group, and we just walk you through three of them. You have to go down to the bottom of the screen, the very bottom, where there's a white strip. There's a few key buttons. So on the left edge, there's a button that has the number 44, 45, and there's a little picture of a few human heads and a kind of dialogue cartoon box. If you click that, up will pop two windows. On the left edge is a kind of film strip view of everybody who is in here right now. So you can just mouse over people and learn that Tom Riley is a writer, or that Francine Diaz is an instructional designer, and so on. You get a quick sense of everybody who's here. To the right of that is a chat box. And the chat box has, well, it's a chat for everybody who's here. And you can see right now that people have introduced themselves. Tom has already made jokes. You can see people competing about weather. And throughout this discussion, people will be chatting away. I find that people often socialize to make informal comments, and they share ideas and questions for the speaker and for our topics. Often it's a good place to stash a link to a project. So the chat box is one way. Now, back to that white strip. Next to the chat box button, you'll see a question mark with a circle. If you click that, up will pop a little dialog box, and you can type in a question or a comment that you would like everybody else to address. So if you do that, when the time is right, we'll flash it on the screen so everyone can see it, then I'll read it out loud so everyone can hear it, which is pretty handy. But best of all, next to that question mark icon button on the white strip is an icon of a raised hand. If you click that, that tells us that you want to join us on stage. So if you have a microphone that's working and your camera is working and you're in a place where you can talk out loud, click that and you can join us and you can talk with our guest, myself, and everybody all at once. It's pretty neat. In fact, up here on the stage, we can have up to 4 different pods at once. So we can have 3 other people besides myself, 2 other people, including the guest. We can have a kind of panel as we go. Welcome, Jess, by the way. I'm glad to see you. So those are three ways. You can use the chat box, you can use the question, you can raise your hand and join us, and all throughout the session, you'll have plenty of opportunities to do that. Pick the one that's most comfortable for you. And those of you who are on Twitter, if you'd like to tweet out about this, please use the hashtag FTTE. We'll be glad to hear from you. We're really glad and thankful that Shindig has made this technology available. I want to thank one other sponsor, one other supporter, which is our friends on Patreon. Patreon is a crowdfunding site like GoFundMe or Kickstarter, and it funds here our work in the future of education and technology. So if you look at the very bottom left of the entire Shindig screen, you'll see a button that says Support the Future Transform. Click that, up will pop Patreon, and you can learn how it works. For as little as $1 a month, you can contribute to keeping the lights on, the machines running, all the conversations going. We're really grateful to our friends, especially the friends who donate even more than $1 a month. People like Michael Haggins and Corey and Kyle Johnson and Paul. Wonderful people. We're grateful to them for their support. Now, that's how the forum works. That's who supports it. That's how we got here. Let me introduce this week's guest. This week's guest is named Bryan, and he spells it correctly. So this is a Future Transform first. We have two Bryans. In fact, we could possibly call today's session Between the Bryans, if you like. Bryan's at Penn State, where he's a systems developer. I think of him as a mad scientist / genius because he is the lead on a project called HAX. What is HAX? How many of their acronyms can we come in? This might be the next big thing for educational technology and courseware. Let's take a look. Tara, let's dispense with the slide and bring Bryan up on stage. There's always this dramatic moment where someone's coming up on stage. We have the drum roll as they are. There you are. Ah, Bryan.
Hello, other Bryan, spelled correctly.
I know. It's pretty rare to have this. This is a kind of utopian moment. I'm very glad of it. So, Bryan, tell us, first of all, where are you today and what do you do? Introduce yourself to the mob.
So, the mob, nice. So, hi, I'm other Bryan. You can refer to me as No Beard Bryan. I'm at work today. I have a really cool office. I just stash a bunch of technology junk back there, Lms logos and the like. So I work at Penn State. I'm a systems developer. I've been here for about 10 years, and I'm crazy about improving educational technology because it's terrible, pretty much across the board. So yeah.
That's who you are, and that's what you do.
That's
welcome. I'm glad you could be here. Friends, I have a bunch of questions to start with, but let me just, if I could, put out a ground rule for today. We're talking about some pretty detailed technology, some wild ideas, and some very precise terminology and technology. At no point should you feel intimidated or confused. If you have questions, please ask them. I won't let anybody be embarrassed. We have all kinds of good things to ask. And also, don't let me hog the floor. I know you guys will have comments and questions with galore once we get going. So, first of all, Bryan, to begin with, I have to ask, in my understanding, HAX is part of Lms Learning Network. Why don't you tell us what the Lms LN is?
So Lms LN is this logo. Pop it around. So it's actually, our logo is a dual purpose imagery. So it's a snowflake because we feel that, all courses and all faculty are these unique beings. And so they need a unique home instead of just a generic, like, here we bought the big box, we signed the check, and now you have a learning management and learning occurs. That there's a lot more variability than that. So it's a platform that enables us to kind of build things more organically. It's also a network diagram. And so it's this little snowflake because it's unique, and it's a network diagram because we kind of build out these learning spaces in a more organic fashion based on the needs of what the faculty has. So that's where the name comes from. Lms originally comes from standing for, I believe it was e-learning management system. So we have double the learning. So it's double, just like this is double the Bryans with double the Ys. It's fantastic. HAX is short for Headless Authoring Experience. We cheated. It should, I guess, be HAE, but HAX sounds cooler. And HAX is HAX is the authoring experience we recently rolled into Lms Learning Network. But as the headless is this word that people go, oh my gosh. But from a developer standpoint, it implies it does not require a backend in order to operate. So it's in front-end development technology, this is known as decoupled. And so it's very portable. You can move it around to different systems. And so I've been doing a lot of demos of it, running in and out of Lms in about 6 or 7 other systems.
Well, let's dive into the different parts of that and how that works. My understanding is that Lms LN is your vision of what the next generation digital learning environment could be, but it's not exactly a mess. This is something different. It's more distributed, yet uniform. It has silos, but it seems to be more discontinuous. Can you explain a bit more about Lms before we dive into HAX?
Yeah, sure. So I would say the major difference between, if you had like a Canvas or Blackboard or what have you, their worldview is we're the grocery store and you come to us, and then these other shipping containers show up, and we'll call those LTI, and they deliver the goods and you pick them up off the shelf, right? And so because they've created that uniformity as far as like, we've got this shipping container and we know that it pulls into the back dock and we get our supplies, you can connect with lots of different vendors. However, where this approach fundamentally is lacking is that those vendors have no knowledge of each other. And so you get these kind of one-offy, like, hey, I click this screen and I go to the next page and I read some content in an LMS, and then I get the next screen and there's a learning interaction, but it's completely isolated from everything else. The data can't really pass between anything except the LMS. So Lms is set up in such a way that the different systems that we set up for it can talk to each other. So we kind of just send people out of the LMS because they're terrible, and I would love for this not to just be bashing the LMS, like that's what everybody does. But our systems actually kind of be careful. Our systems have more of a first party type of communication with each other. So a lot of times, like what's a practical example of that? So we'll have a course content space because content systems kind of stink in learning management systems. And so we'll have a content space, students will engage in a lot of content, but then we'll also go, did you know that teaching studio-based instruction online, which I work in an arts college, there aren't a lot of great tools for that. So Lms empowers us to be able to build that other radically different type of system in the same type of a pattern and at a much faster pace. And still manage kind of the chaos that can happen from building lots of your own systems. So, it's different from, a tool that you funnel into the LMS in that case, right? Because a studio environment has students posting media back and forth to each other, having discussions against it, having community, as opposed to just a pure content engine. But yet this system allows us to build both of those simultaneously.
On this end. And thank you, Bryan, for answering my question at length. Before I go further, there's a question from the chat box, which I'll relay. This is from Ray Garcelon, who wants to know, how can HAX currently integrate into an LMS, such as Canvas? And if it can, does it do so with Scorm 1.2, XAPI, or LTI?
So HAX is not specific to education. So it is obviously being developed for educational purposes. Dr. Charles Severance, Dr. Chuck from the Sakai community, integrated HAX into Sakai as a prototype, say it's just purely a prototype, using his project called Sugi. So the idea is kind of that this is a way of authoring, if you think of like CK editor or Wysi, what you see is what you get, WYSIWYG technology of yesteryear. Think of this as a next generation version of that, and that you could put this into any LTI tools that you create. It's not like a thing that you would LTI on itself.
But when you say you create, I mean, you're referring to staff, but an entire campus.
Potentially, yeah. Potentially,
so this is, again, we come back to HAX is really part of Lms LN. These two are closely integrated.
They are closely integrated. We just recently made it available to people that use Lms at Penn State, and so they can, when we're building out course content, if you think of Lms as like we present course content, you might be in a learning management system and it'll say read chapter 5. Then you'd click and go off to chapter 5. And Chapter 5's content has been orchestrated and created via HAX, is the idea.
That makes more and more sense. We have more questions that are coming in. We have a text question. Let's flash this up on the screen. This is from Susan Jones. She says, "You're trying to make something flexible. Are there issues with things like math content?" Good question, Susan.
No, that is a good question. In order to kind of organize the potential chaos of doing so much custom development, we use a technology standard called Web Components, which is actually part of the browser that you and I are using right now. It's something that that the browsers agreed upon in about 2011, but browser technology adoption takes a while to get there. So we're just about now hitting the point that this standard is readily available in every major browser. Why that matters is forever to do something like math. Me as a developer, I would have to integrate a really complex JavaScript library or whatever, and then make it work in Canvas or make it work in this very specific place. What the Web Components standard allows us to do is basically say, well, when I put this tag onto the web page, and it's called, in our case, we call it LRN-math, that tag has everything it needs to know to understand how to unpack and display the math. And that tag will work on any browser. And so it's just a fundamentally different way of doing the development, so that once, actually a group from Eberly College of Science at another college at Penn State, they developed the math tag. And so now we just throw the math tag into everything. We don't have to worry about, will this render LaTeX, for example. We can just have people write LaTeX in our editor and it'll show up.
So tags are key integrating functions or key ways of finding your way through the system.
Yeah, key ways of kind of the building blocks for us building it. So if you envision like a Canvas or a Blackboard, their engineers go back, they write, if you know HTML or CSS, they write a whole ton of divs and they style them to look a certain way, and that gives you a button. And then you click the button and it takes you to do something. The Web Components standard, allows us to actually be able to take that button and call it a new thing. So like forever you would have, if you would inspect the document that you're viewing right now, you would see like H bracket HTML and bracket div and bracket A, bracket bold, bracket blink, obviously. So this standard allows you to manufacture your own tags that the browser understands. So I can boil up a whole ton of complex functionality into a single tag, place that tag on the page, and the page will go, oh yeah, I know exactly what that is. And so that level of portability, I think, will fundamentally transform application development. It's what HAX is built on. It's the only thing that makes HAX even possible, because I could bundle up way more functionality than you would actually expect me to be able to build in a consistent manner, and I can deploy it anywhere. As an example of this, we made a bookmarklet, which a bookmarklet, you click the button and it does something to the web page you're on. Well, I made a bookmarklet that I could go to CNN.com, click it, HAX would inject into CNN.com, and then I could start rewriting articles and generate fake news. I know a lot of stuff goes around about that. Now, it's not to say that it's editing CNN.com, right? It's editing your view of CNN.com. But this is just it's a fundamentally different way of packaging and distributing assets.
This is more and more radical the more we talk about it. We have more questions and comments are coming in the chat. We have a fan. So I asked, well, what do you think of using Lms all-in? And she says, we love it. So hopefully she'll have more to say and she can join us. By the way, again, anyone else, just if your video is working, just click the raised hand icon so you can join us up here on stage. We have another question here from Maria Anderson, dear friend of the program, who asks, if you had to explain HAX to faculty, how can HAX help you next term? How would you explain it? Beautiful question.
I know you sent out a lot of material, Brian. Is this something that maybe I could just show for 2 or 3 minutes? Do you think that would help? Because this is a highly visual concept, or would you like to keep it more theoretical question answer? I don't want it to turn into just a presentation, obviously. But I mean, it is a system.
Let's leave the visuals off for a second. And if you just describe this again to a faculty member.
So for
Why
a
would you
faculty
do that?
member, so another part of this concept that we get because of this highly portable item is we're developing a desktop app. And so I say developing as in we're still working on, right? So I'm not saying next term that you can go to the App Store and download this, but because our authoring experience, because HAX is ultimately, if you think of the way you edit a page and it's just highly visual, think of like Wix or Website Tonight software type of an experience. If that was assumed, what kind of platform could you build? And so we have HAX integrated into 6 different content management systems. And we're also working on a desktop app for it. So for a faculty, I would explain it as, if you think of a course as this content outline and, hierarchical content, even if that's just like modules, or weeks of instruction or what have you, this is a way that you could rapidly build out that outline and then assemble the content for that. And have it in a format that's LMS agnostic. It's written for the web. So I know someone else in the chat mentioned, does this replace LMSs? It can start to like I can inject and be talking about math in a Drupal website. Now, am I telling you to go use Drupal right now for teaching? No, but if those are the tools you have access to, and we augment those tools in the places we're comfortable with using, we need to go to LMSs less and less and be asking a lot less of like, what is it that Blackboard has bestowed upon us now? And more of we can kind of organically turn any system into a learning management system. Because, if you go to Wikipedia, that's a learning management system at some level.
Wikipedia is LMS. Miranda, I hope that I hope that helps. And if you're near a camera, again, to join us. We have another question, which comes from Andy Anderson, who is competing with me in a few different things, including grayness. And he asks, what's the functionality of a web component written in JavaScript? Or is it compiled in like Java? And what are the security implications which torpedo Java?
So web components is it's a meta specification. So it's part of why it's super misunderstood even among developers. So it's a 4-part specification of the browser itself that basically says, hey, if we integrate these 4 specs, we can create what we'll all call web components, which is basically that you can create your own custom HTML elements and they'll render correctly. So they are written in JavaScript primarily. And so it's a runtime type of a thing. Some of the parts of the spec help naturally remove some of the security implications that you mentioned, torpedo Java. So for one, it's not compiled. It's running at runtime. 2, one of the specs has to do with the encapsulation of that item and its reach out into other items. And another part of the spec makes sure that what you're putting on the screen is just HTML types of things. We're getting really in the weeds there.
Well, this is. And in fact, we have, and we can keep plowing through the weeds or look at other parts of the ecosystem as well. Melissa, thank you for adding a link to. Tara has just put up a podium option on the screen. So if you'd like to join us, that's an even faster way. If you simply click on that, you'll be teleported up on stage. So if you don't want to go through the routine of asking us how to do it, that'll do it even more quickly. The chat box has been flowing with a lot of different comments and questions and observations. So I just want to make sure I get everybody's thoughts here. Ray also asks about HAX replacing the LMS, saying that unless you can't replace the LMS, you're going to have to integrate with the LMS. Or do you see HAX replacing the LMS in, say, 2 to 5 years?
I mean, there's a lot of faculty that just say, I hate this, and they go elsewhere. And that elsewhere, I mean, I work on building systems and people will say, I hate your system, and they'll go elsewhere. And so what I think we're seeing is more a rejection of the fact that I am putting all of my knowledge into this third-party thing that I don't really have control over. It's more a personal ownership type of a problem than it is a tools problem, increasingly I'm finding. So we'll have faculty that say, like, well, yeah, I could have put this in Canvas or Blackboard previously, but you know what? I present at conferences. I'm not going to put my work in an LMS and try to present it at a conference. That's not a thing. So I'm going to put my work in this WordPress site, and then I'm going to tell my students, hey, here's where your course content is, or here's where the latest thing that I wrote about. Right? Like if, you, Brian, or me, if we're going to market ourselves and what we do, even with this future form thing, you're not going to go, oh, of course, I'll put that in a learning management system. But yet somehow, when it comes to educational concepts, we just say, let's force everything into this other bucket. That's learning management. And so could I see HAX replacing that? Would you look at it and say this will replace an LMS? Probably not. Where I know it's capable of going in the very near future, I could see it replacing a lot of functions of a learning management system. It's around content construction, presenting material. You can create, self-checks and things like that. So I could see it eating into like a training space, probably more so than like an LMS space per se, because LMS space, you start to get into formalized testing and communication tools. And that's not what HAX does fundamentally. It's not for reaching out and contacting all the students in a class or for managing a grade book. But if we can create an engaging enough content experience, there's a good chance that those other things start to kind of fade away and start to be more like the LMS is just a communication vehicle.
For sending containers. Now, we had a question from Ed Webb, not too far from you. He's at Dickinson College in central Pennsylvania. And Ed had a more strategic question to ask, which was, quote, why do we need dedicated Edtech platforms rather than the tools of the open web? Is this purely a function of FERPA and similar privacy laws mandating effectively walled gardens? Or is it a matter of user convenience or something else?
Yes. I don't know what you think, Brian, but I think it is FERPA on steroids. So I am, if I'm an administrator, I am so concerned about FERPA and the legality issue that I say, hey, all student and experience content, this goes here. And that creates this walled garden, and that walled garden makes it nice and tight. So I know that legally everything is protected in this box. Do we need to do that beyond, legal ramifications? I'm not sure.
Well, I think FERPA is I don't want to opine on this. I'm just the MC today, but one key point I think is copyright, where the laws that we have about copyright and education try and get us to use the LMS. That basically, if Brian and I are teaching a class on film, we'd want to have all that content in a box that nobody else can see except our students. And when the class is over, nobody else can see them. So I think that drives it quite a bit. And now we have Maria on stage. Hello, Maria.
Hey, I'm not entirely sure I remember what my question was at this point, but I just wanted to kind of reflect on, it's interesting what Brian just said, because I do think that that's a piece of it, right? We can't just put everything out online. And then you have a lot of faculty who consider their work IP. I think some of the more forward-leaning OER type faculty would think HAX is great, but we talk to customers all the time who are like, as long as nobody else sees my learning objectives, right? And you're like, it's a learning objective. Solve equations is the same learning objective across the entire country. You can't copyright it, right? But they're positive that this is like super solid IP that they own, right? And so they're going to sell it. Yeah, right. They're going to sell it. But the major barrier to adoption is if, in fact, the whole purpose is open, it seems to me that you've got a better case for just providing a wider variety of learning tools inside the LMS that they're already going to use. A lot of colleges say you will use the LMS for your grades and your communication. End of story. That is the end of the road, right? And so it seems to me that making the flexible tools that can pull into the LMS is a better argument than, we'll just take the people who will abandon it. I think the people who will abandon it are maybe 5 to 10% of faculty. But that's just
which is a small number. That's kind of.
I also think it's very specific to the topic they teach. So like we did an audit of, and I'm not saying these are people that abandoned, I don't want to get anyone in trouble, but we did an audit of people that use the learning management system when we switched to learning management systems in our college, and we were only finding like 20 or 30% of faculty actually use the LMS. So whether they, and now that was on campus, that was, primarily face-to-face instruction, but that leaves a lot of people going, but how do you do fill in the blank? And that all happened in the classroom. Grades were entered at a later point in time. I'm sure some of that was.
But that's an N of one, right? You're not spanning community colleges, for-profit colleges.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's very dependent on campus culture.
So to your point about why not create a thing that integrates? What we've made can integrate. So what we've made can be of a lot of interest to OER communities. It can also be a lot of interest to non-education communities at all. We've seen the most interest from content management solution types of places, because what we're describing is make the information architecture of your CMS simpler and have a more powerful authoring tool that works across platforms and across ecosystems. So I'm always like, there's something wrong with education when it comes to building technology. Let's look somewhere else and then pull that back in. So I do agree with your point, though, that you could, if we made it so that we could integrate into a Blackboard, Canvas, D2L, Sakai, whatever, that would be a way to gain adoption. Dr. Chuck actually showed HAX integrated into Sugi, and Sugi is a thing that you can deploy into LMSs very rapidly. And so that is always kind of my mindset, is like, I'm going to act like that's this walled garden because it is. And I'm going to build stuff for the open web, and then it can adopt it later.
I think it's interesting that faculty always make the choice of how people learn, right? Like, I've always wondered if we could get to a future where students make the choice about the platform they want to use, and the faculty content is so transferable to those platforms that each student can decide on their own app that is the one that's most preferable to them. It kind of seems like we do things backwards by letting the person who is going to use the app the least decide what the rest of the people use.
So in a weird way, HAX also does that. Sorry, what were you saying, Ryan?
Yeah.
No, I was going to say, please go on.
Oh, so we're actually working on another project associated to HAX called HAX CMS, which is basically just a microsite factory. And why you would care about a microsite factory is if you're a student and you want to just put your stuff out on the internet, especially in education context, it's like, hey, I want access to blogging tools. Yeah, but for FERPA purposes, we need you to put those in a walled garden. Kind of defeats the point of blogging. So HAX, because of what it's doing, it's just writing. It's basically writing the web components that I would write as a developer, but it's using a UI to do it. The content you create at the end is just a big old blob of HTML that's highly portable. So as a result of that, we can create a blogging platform for students, but the difference fundamentally between a blogging platform for students and a content authoring tool for faculty is more or less the elements that you use to express things in a hierarchy versus a flat list. So we could get to a point with this technology where we take the instructor's content that is open, even if the format is open, like the word open gets overused, but if the format is open and can be portable, then it can be locked behind a walled garden, or it can be put in a training space, as you mentioned, Maria, so that they go, oh, this is my IP and it's in this place. And you go, that's awesome. Do you want to move it over there? Oh, that'll be so much work. That we're already prepped for a world where you can basically click and it goes there, instead of people carrying stuff around in Word documents forever.
Well, it seems like there's not much a faculty member can do if a student wants to copy and paste IP from that learning management system elsewhere, right? Most schools don't have a dedicated team of web crawlers to go looking for that kind of stuff. But anyways, I'll let the next person ask the question.
Well, let me welcome Ray Garcia on stage. And Ray is carrying on Maria's theme of having a door in the background, which is pretty neat.
2 doors.
2 doors. Excellent. So we get a British history theme here. 2 door. So what questions do you have for The other Bryan.
So can I be heard? Am I heard?
Yeah.
Can you hear me
Yes.
okay? Yeah. Yeah, I'm not here to patronize any of it or be problematic, but I have to say, you know, with Bryan, when I looked at Bryan's, I found HAX about some months ago, and my reaction was, wow, you know, for all the talk of the next generation learning system, this is it. So close as I see. I know HTML, CSS, a little JavaScript, you know, as an instructional designer. So my questions were really in the context of what I texted out that you both saw. There's going to be LMSs or whatever is going on with, you know, whether it's good or bad or should we replace them. I mean, I think Bryan already said that they're not going to be replaced. HAX can't replace them in the next 2 to 5 years. So I guess, you know, what I was really asking was this next generation content creation that's portable, it has to be used in LMSs or in an LMS that you're going to use. And, you know, and I actually, in the two I'm not even naming names, the two big LMSs, I put out to both of them. I said, you know, are you thinking of upgrading your content, your text editor, rich content editor? And I got really ambiguous answers like, you know, those things are basically 20 years old in LMSs. And what I saw with Bryan's project was, you know, it was just astounding. But, you know, there's all those things, unless it can integrate in some way. And we are, I think most of the people out here are going to be in a university. It's whatever degree you put them in. You know, because to be real specific, what I asked one of the places, and they gave me a 100-point badge for asking it, but didn't really have an answer, was, you know, there's a lot of wasted space when we as content creators or content sharers want to put something in LMS. And what I saw with Bryan's thing was a way to, just like Google has done with their new Google sites and what WordPress is doing, and I don't know, Bryan knows to whatever degree they use web components, but that is what is so desperately needed for over a decade. So it's got to happen within the LMSs. So I'm just wondering, what are the possibilities of that in the next 2 to 5 weeks?
So,
or, you know,
2 to 5 weeks.
No, yeah, 2 to 5 within the near future. No, I know it's actually 2 to 5 weeks.
So part of this is that's a really good point, and it's not that I forego everything that exists currently just to do it. You're getting a lot of feedback there. Hold on, oh, there we go. Okay, thank you, Bryan. So it's not that I forego and just say, like, you know what, screw LMSs. Who needed them anyway, right? Because that's not practical either. But someone's got to be a contrarian, so it's going to be me in that area, right? If I were to say, hey, let's do everything the way that Canvas does, or whoever the leader is today, which is now Canvas, then I'm always going to build crap that looks like it's from the 90s, just like Canvas and Blackboard and the rest of them. I'll say the names. I don't care. So yeah, you're right. They have those text editors. So part of this is like, look, we need to look at the positives going forward. And like, web components is the future of the web. It just is fundamentally. You mentioned WordPress. They use their editor is called Gutenberg. Gutenberg is built on technology called React. It is pretty darn in alignment with where web components is going, right? As far as the future, they're very similar constructs. It lets people just reach out and touch and edit things. That's good for the future of the web. Sakai is going to get a new, I believe it's their next rubric tool is built in something called Polymer. Polymer is what we build in. So Polymer is most likely going to be in the core of Sakai, which then makes it a lot better aligned to have web components ingested because it'll have web components in it already. Desire to Learn, if you go to webcomponents.org, Desire to Learn is actually open sourcing all of their design assets that make up their system. So you can, if you want, you know, if you build an LTI tool for your university and you have D2L and you want, whenever you do the launch, everything to be styled the same, right? It's a big issue for, you know, continuity of systems kind of a thing. You don't want a lot of cognitive overload. Even in like links are blue here and over here they're gray or whatever. You can go and download a DTOL-link tag and your links are guaranteed to look exactly like Desire to Learn's. So that means they've invested in Polymer. That means they've invested in web components. So some of this, even just from an advocacy side, pushing on those forums to say, like, your editor's terrible, right? Like they legitimately are. Like CK Editor and TinyMCE, which are the two major text editors everybody uses, are from the Stone Ages. You're absolutely right. And they're amazing tools in the 90s. And what a lot of people did, hell, I did it up until recently. I said, oh, you want to make content? Well, yeah, that's we save that little HTML blob. You work in this space, go away. And that's not acceptable with modern tools, right? I mean, as you said, you've seen hacks, and you at some level you can't unsee hacks when I do demos of it usually, just because of the pace at which you can generate things. And part of that is to be provocative, to be like, I can integrate this here, I can integrate this here, I can integrate this here, and just start to say, and our development team is 4 people, right? And those types of provocations are the things that start to maybe get the industry to move into modern standards, right? And to see things like Sakai via the Apereo community, which has been talking a lot about web component technology, realize, hey, these things are portable. Maybe this is the design portability, much like we had the app integration portability with LTI. Right now, we're starting to talk in the design side, and this is a way to do this, have a cohesive visual design language, if you will, so that all of us can agree, let's say we built our own HTML. Why not? I mean, if we're educators, right, is a learning -objective, could we agree upon what a learning objective is? And then could we place that on the web no matter where we wanted it to be? Tomorrow, does that help you and I? A little bit. But 10 years from now, when we've semantically written the web with learning objectives, that's a big deal when you have search crawlers going through. It's a big deal for accessibility. There was a question about accessibility before. So I really think this technology has huge implications for the future of our systems and their integration and design. So yeah, you won't always be happy in 3 to 5 weeks, but you should be happy with the fact that I started working on hacks in November. And it's
I saw the announcement in Penn State. Well, you said contrarian and provocateur, maybe, but I mean, you are someone who's done, visually and had it there, what everyone in education, including the LMS people, have been saying that's what we need for about 10 years. So hope something comes of it, but thank you. And I hope some people who can get things done take notice to what you're doing. It's definitely visionary. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you. I really appreciate your questions, and thank you for coming up. Speaking of coming up, longtime friend of the program, Tom Hames, is about to come on. And if I'm right, he will continue a blue theme for all of us right now. Tom, Tom, can you see or hear us, or are you, or are there bandwidth issues? Let's see. Well, I think he's getting some connection problem. While he's doing that, better. Can you see and hear us, Tom?
Oh,
there we go.
Intermittent flashes of connecting and not connecting. Hello, Brian Square.
Connected now.
Okay.
Welcome.
Quick question, or maybe a long question. I don't know. There's a reason that the LMSs that exist now are from the 90s. Is because those companies have never been able to effectively iterate at any sort of speed. I had hopes 10 years ago that Moodle would be able to do this, but it fell apart because the people who were supposedly building on it didn't know how to build. And so, it was the 1,000 monkeys problem, I think, to a degree, and we wanted to handle it. What is your thinking strategy going forward to how we can iterate these kinds of systems, specifically yours or just in general? Because it's a constant frustration to me, who knows what the real world looks like, to suddenly be plunged into the dark ages trying to do something that is as hard as teaching. Where I want to be able to do all these things, and I can't find a platform that will do what I want. So I'm always the one who comes in and wants to break everything. I haven't looked at hacks yet, and I'm about to, but I just was wondering if you had thoughts about how you're going to maintain the project and just sort of general thoughts about how to maintain an innovation project in the education space.
So I think you're speaking more to where Lms comes in. So a good way of seeing that maybe we're onto something different is I'd more or less video tutorial journal, if you will, everything I'm coding at any time. So pretty much once or 3 times a week, if I have what I consider to be a breakthrough on something or want to explain a concept, I just fire up the webcam or screencast and screencast like, hey, here's this concept, throw it out on YouTube. Well, I've been doing that since 2008. I've been doing that pretty much the entire time I've been doing this. Lms Learning Network was actually an idea that I got in the shower one day in 2012. And I assure you that what it looked like in 2012 and what it looks like now, you would say those aren't the same system. And we've been able to successfully do that while it being out in production to students. That is the key fundamental difference between what I think we're building and what industry has. Industry and this is where you get so far in the weeds of technology that unfortunately, like, I feel like you start to lose people as to why they should care. But this matters a lot. So when you build a system like a learning management system, and I'm the designer, and I envision the way this is going to look and function, and then I put it on paper, probably, or a whiteboard. Coders come in and they try to kind of translate that, right? And I have a system. Lms fundamentally is not a system. It is a system that stamps out other systems. And it's that at first needless complexity, it seems, because you'd say it's a course. I'm going to teach this course. Why do I need? And in our case, it's a Drupal site factory. So when you set up a course in Lms, you fill out a form and you say, I would like to teach using the content outlining tool and the studio tool. Well, day one when we started, there was no studio tool for starters. And there was no media tool, which it also has. And there was no crazy hyper interactive media tool that it has. So you select these different tools, you hit go, it actually runs jobs that build these little sites. And if you think of these sites as kind of these contained organisms, that they actually are their own loop. So each new loop is its own loop. And day one, you don't care about that. And day two, you don't care about that. Next semester, you sure as hell care about that when I come up with some crazy thing that changes the way that all this should work. Because what that architecture has allowed me to do is to pick one course that a faculty member has said, I've got this brilliant idea. And we go, that's awesome, let's do that. And we do that, but it's in this little vacuum that actually is out in a production environment. But it's created off of the same pattern that this other one was. So we might actually have kind of we take like a loss leader mentality. So we'll pour a ton of functionality and effort into one course and drag it way beyond where everything else is. And then when this other course, when we're ready and we say, oh, we have live feedback from students and faculty that this is awesome, we have a sustainable upgrade path to pull all that stuff forward. That's something that fundamentally LMSs that exist can't do, because they're all architected with you click, you have one database, everything's in one place, and day one, you don't really care about that, but we are there beyond day one. And so, when we're semester to semester, there's new innovations that come out, we can try that stuff out without it disrupting our current development methodology, right? Our instructional designers in my group, they can communicate the same links, even if that's, your development methodology. They can communicate the same relative location of things. They can manage it all in one place, but the courses start to more organically change over time. So I don't know if that should make you hopeful or depressed. But
makes me very hopeful, actually. Real quick follow-on. Do you have that illustrated in some way on your website in terms of your process? lmsln.org. There's a playlist that I believe has some doodle casts where I do this kind of, like I was just drawing on this in the air, where I'm actually drawing on the screen and describing the process over time. Because with lmsln, it is really, it's an over time thing, because it's going to keep morphing and growing. Right.
And it's because we're set up to allow for that flexibility. We're set up to allow for hacks to be rolled out in production courses, but just one or two, and get enough feedback to go, oh, you know what? This is stable. Let's do this. And more or less push a button, and now it's out for everybody. So that we can kind of rapid prototype in production as a result. But yeah, there's as I said, I've been video journaling more or less everything for like 10 years now in preparation for this interview with Bryan today.
Okay, well, I'll look for that. It seems very. I've been working on a thing called innovation loops, which sounds fairly similar, but to see that you've actually put that into practice, that's exciting. I'm going to go find that. Thanks.
Cool. Be in touch.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Tom, for your questions. Speaking of pressing a button, Bryan, let's show people. Let's do a bit of a screen sharing with you.
Okay.
Why don't you show them HAX in operation? And friends, while we're bringing this up, it's going to take about 3 seconds for the screen to switch over. So you might want to just count to 3. So there's the HAX the website.
All right, are you able to see that and hear me at the same time? Okay, cool. So you might, see this link or talk about it, and the question is, well, how do I use this in LMS? Why should I care? Well, so what HAX is if you think of the WYSIWYG as the entire site that you're working on, that you as a content author go, you're like, that video, I want to make the video bigger. You just make the video bigger, or you move the video around, or you go, oh, that's not the right link, and that we could call open a consistent way of editing and interfacing with that. And you'd be like, yeah, I just want to change the background of that. But because we're abstracted away from traditional HTML, because that's what this is, these are custom elements that we're building, I can do things like this that you can't do. So you might not have noticed, but what happened right there is an accessibility breakthrough. This text flipped dynamically based on being aware of what its background color is. And that might seem pretty mundane, but the fact that you don't have to think about accessibility means I can guarantee accessibility. And if I can guarantee accessibility, you're going to screw up accessibility a lot less. But again, you don't care about videos. Maybe you really love Bryan Alexander, and so you want to search YouTube for Bryan Alexander. Dude shows up everywhere. Look at this, interviewed in 2017. And you select that video from YouTube, and you say, I want that video to go in. And now I have it, even with the metadata associated with where it came from. So now I've hacked the Bryan Alexander. And so because of the way in which this is built, you would go like, all right, I don't care about Bryan Alexander, or maybe I want to make a meme about NASA because NASA is amazing. Right? And so you wouldn't even do this, right? Even if you wanted to, you wouldn't do this in the context of your teaching. You wouldn't tell a joke in line with your material because it's too hard to do. And everyone knows jokes are the best. Let's say I wanted a layout material. I should just be able to say I want a layout and it be halfway through the thing. And now you'd say, okay, so you've played with this, it's in a static space, but why do you care? Well, you really care because that authoring experience is decoupled. And by decoupled, it means it can be ingested into other things rapidly. So this is that same identical authoring experience of the static website, every inch of code being the same, but here. So now when I want to teach my students about Bryan Alexander,
as you
fantastic
should.
Bryan. I mean, he's one of the best named Bryans, probably next to me. And so then we can put that in. And now we have another talk by Bryan. Wow, you just show up everywhere. It's like Bryan and Bryan and Bryan. Whoa. And so then I can scale Bryan. And I can, in the context, in this case, in Lms Learning Network, I can save. And now I've got Bryan Alexander saved on my page in Lms Learning Network, which will show up here in a second. Got some performance hit with all this video streaming. There we go. So there's Bryan. And so because it's decoupled, though, we can kind of just build stuff like wherever we want, right? This is yet another system, and we'll make it about Bryan. Hey, we're going to write a whole course about Bryan Alexander while we're here right now. And so I would say I want to present this course as an outline. And so there's Bryan A. I'm going to go to my course about Bryan A. And in this invocation of HAX and the web component architecture, we've got just this basic content player. But if I want to outline, and you can imagine like module 1 is about people named Bryan, right? And we should probably indent that and save that. Then I've got my module 1 and I can start to tell people about people named Bryan. Well, there's only one person, well, 2 at this point, people named Bryan that are amazing. And so we better find both of them. So I'll go find me. There we go. There's me on some other podcast, but I'm going to put me in as a QR code. right? But you can't read a QR code, Brian. I mean, like, we're not robots, so I should probably convert that back over to a video. There we go. There's Brian as a video.
Sweet.
Awesome. Okay. And so then I save. Now you go, okay, cool. What the heck is happening? And this is actually the point, is I just like slam you with what is going on with all this moving stuff around. Well, what's going on is this is just writing HTML. It's writing HTML very fast because I drank a lot of coffee, because that's what I do before these things. But if I can pull it up, there we go. Fundamentally, when you see my great new content, that's all it is. All you're seeing is a static HTML page being put on the screen. And then when I put that video in the page, there's video-player. And so the web component standard allows us to create these really well semantically named things and then create an authoring experience that can be assumed. And so really HAX is able to be extended into any number of visual and functional components very rapidly. I believe on this website there's all these different ways of presenting material. So whether that's a multiple choice quiz, or whether that's properly citing something with a license. Maybe you want an article from Wikipedia about the fundamental technology this is built on, right? I could do that. Or maybe you don't know what that is to look for, so you want to search Wikipedia without going to it. Bryan Alexander's name's got to show up somewhere. Alexander, are you on Wikipedia? Well, a poorer named Brian, but so this poorer version of Brian. There we go. Brian with an I is like poor man's Brian. But so we'll put that one in, and you can see that I have the article for Bryan Alexander. It's the wrong name one. I apologize. But it is 100% accurately semantically cited. And so obviously you're going to have training in your learning management system about how to do that one thing right there, so that Google can index this appropriately and cite you, because you will worry about your citation and your name and your private IP out on the web. But if the component itself knows how to do that, then those issues go away. As far as I don't know. Oh, there we go. I'm back.
You're back. Brian, this is a fantastic demo. That's very, very slick. Just to see that work so well in all those different pieces. And of course, a great idea for a class.
Thank you.
Friends, we have more questions. The problem is we're out of time. It's the end of our hour, and we've raced through HAX and Lms at top speed. So I think, Brian, you've given us all your caffeine boost. I'm very conscious of time. I want to respect everybody's schedule. So let me say, first of all, thank you. It is a treat. It is a privilege to be in with you on the ground floor of this great invention. I think I can speak for everybody here that this has been very exciting, very challenging, very stimulating, and this gives a lot of hope for the future of education and technology. How can we keep up with you? What's the best way to keep up with HAX as it develops?
Well, thank you for the kind words and having me on. HAX, you can follow on Twitter. I'm BTOPRO. I'm BTO Pro on basically every social platform that exists. And I write about it pretty much nonstop as far as, new elements we've created for presentational purposes. Or I'm a BTO108 at psu.edu if you want to reach out and figure out, how we can talk more about specific ways of how this works. As Brian had teased in some tweets earlier, this is not vaporware, because it probably sounds like vaporware relative to what you're used to seeing. This is the power of web components. I mean, it's the power of that standard, really, and I'm just leveraging it.
You're doing a lot more than leveraging. You're doing a lot of work, and we've already. If you look at the chat box, we have a lot of fans. I need to wrap this up and send you off, but thank you once more. I'm sure we'll all be in touch. But don't go away, friends. We need to just say a few words about next week and what's coming up with the rest of the forum. And thank you again, Brian. So before we let you all go, let me just say that wasn't that amazing? I mean, I feel like we're in the room with Sir Tim Berners-Lee in the 1990s, and he's saying, here's this web thing. What do you think? Keep an eye on Brian. Now, next week, we're going to shift to another technology. We're going to have great friends of the forum, Maya Gorjeva and Emery Craig, here to talk about virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality. They're coming at a great time because this very day, Magic Leap released for sale its version of its VR, AR, MR headset. So this is a really exciting time. Maya and Emery are the world's leaders in thinking about VR, AR, MR in education. I'm really, really looking forward to our discussion with them. Now, also coming up that we're still working on, our book club is finishing up New York 2140. Discussion has been wild. People have been all over this with tons of comments, blog posts, photography. We have one of our readers has been diligently going around New York City, taking photos of the different landmarks in the story, and then editing them and then adding pointers to them. I mean, it's extraordinary stuff from Bill Benson. We're finishing up next week, and then we have another week to continue just reflecting on it because it's a massive and important book. Please join us for that. And also, Tara, over to the next slide. If you'd like to learn more about that book, if you want to grab a copy, please go to the bookstore. We're going to have more and more books coming into this as we progress. And if you want to keep talking about this, like what's going on with New York 2140? What does HAX mean? Is AR something I can use in my teaching and learning? We have a lot of places for you to have these conversations. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see that if you use the hashtag FTTE, we can keep talking about this. We have groups now on Slack, LinkedIn, and Facebook, all with questions trickling in. So if you have comments or questions, please use those. And in the meantime, thank you so much for your participation. We're really grateful for the chance to explore the future of education with you, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.